Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good afternoon to all. Hope you all can hear me. Thank you very much for inviting me to deliver this lecture. This is the third time I'm doing this. The topic, as you know, regional integration and economic development in Asia. My outline, first I would like to introduce Asian economies to you. Then we talk about economic integration in Asia and the importance of integration for Asia. Next, we'll talk about the challenges, then summary and conclusions. I'm planning to talk about 45 minutes and give you a break of 5 minutes. And after the break, we continue for another 30 minutes. After the lecture, you get the opportunity to ask questions or clarifications. I start with introducing Asian economies. We live in Asia, so we all know about Asia. There are 6 sub-regions: Northern Asia, Central Asia, Western Asia, Eastern Asia, Southern Asia, Southeast Asia. We know that we live in South Asia. The region of Asia accounts for more than half of the world's population. It is 62.4. From that population, 24% of them live in South Asia. That is 1/5 of world population. In East Asia, 21%, you can see that the percentage of world population live in China is 18%, and India again nearly 18%. So this is very important because a larger proportion of the world population live in Asia and in 1/5 in South Asia. So we look at income groups. World Bank classifies countries into high-income countries, upper-middle-income countries, lower-middle-income countries, and low-income countries according to the per capita income. I understand that all of the students in the audience are not studying economics. So I try to be general as much as possible. Here, when we say income, that is the average income per person. Income of a country is measured by national income. That national income is divided by median population. We get per capita or per person income. From Asian countries, you can see the high-income countries in the first cage. Out of total population in Asia, only 5.4% people live in those countries. Which countries? Like Bahrain, Brunei, Cyprus, Hong Kong, Japan, Korea. Upper middle income countries, 45.6% of population live in those countries, in Lebanon, Malaysia, Maldives. You can see that only South Asian countries in upper middle income countries, only countries, Maldives. Lower middle income countries account for 46.5% of total population. Sri Lanka was in that category until last week. Last week, Parliament decided to change the category of income to low-income countries. So the South Asian countries like Bangladesh, Bhutan, only these, and Pakistan are in lower middle income countries. All the other countries are in low income countries. Now we are among low income countries. How countries are categorized into those groups. There's a new way of doing that, and then previous method, we only consider the new method. Under new method, countries in where per person or average income is less than $1,085 are considered as low-income countries. Last year and the year before, in Sri Lanka's per capita income was just about 3,000, and we were in lower middle income country. But with the economic crisis, our average income has gone down. Not only that, if we are in lower middle income country category, we are not entitled to receive some of the aid loans from World Bank and IMF. So it is important for us to be in the low income category now. Now, those countries where in which her average income is between 4,256 and 13,205 are in upper middle income countries. Higher income countries are those with average incomes above 13,205. So you can see the variation of income even within Asia. When talking about Asia, a considerable living standard and well-being in terms of Human Development Index. Human Development is the index is an index that used to measure the well-being of people. It is a composite index of life expectancy for health. That is, when we are born, the average number of years that we are expected to live, and average years of schooling. Third, gross national income per capita. So it is a composite measure. In terms of that Human Development Index, Asia has a considerable living standard and well-being. Even in a country like us, we know that levels of education, literacy rates are high. Almost all the children go to school at age 5, and majority of them complete secondary education, and a larger proportion goes to complete after secondary education. In terms of health, the indicators of mortality rates, that is the possibility of dying at birth and before reaching the first birthday, those are comparably high in most of the Asian countries. Only 11 low and middle income economies show growth rates below 4%. Most of the other economies in Asia are growing at a good rate. And those countries account for 38.8% of global exports and imports, respectively. This is South Asia. There are 8 countries: Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. South Asia is considered as one of the most dynamic regions in the world. During the last decade, the growth rates of India, Bangladesh, Pakistan were impressive. At a time, they have reached growth rates above 8%. As I said before, 24% of world population live in South Asia. South Asian countries are rich in human resources, and sophisticated skills. You know that people from Asia are doing very well in when they manage to work in developed and developing countries better than others because their skills are good, not only just scales, sophisticated scales. We know that countries like India, they do most of the technical and back office work for top companies. Scientific and technological accomplishments are world class. Over the past decade, India and other countries in South Asia have experienced impressive growth rates. We know that India is becoming a global center for IT. They are doing very well in IT. Then South Asian economies have got together and they have formed an association we call SAARC and they have signed agreements of SEPTA, CEFTA and other bilateral agreements with regional members. That is to improve regional integration. That is to work with each other in the region in order to achieve higher growth rates or to raise their incomes. However, with all that, South Asia is the poorest region in the world. South Asians rank very low in terms of human being. Nutrition is the major cause of this. We know that India is becoming rich. They are very good at doing IT, but still there are people live in poverty, very, very poor, even without basic facilities to live. About 540 million people, that is 45% of the region's population, they are poor. Their average income is less than $1 a day. This is a rough measure of poverty. People who earn even less than $1 a day are considered as poor. So in that measure, nearly half of the people in that region are poor. If we compare that proportion or the percentage with poor countries like Sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, and the Middle East, Latin America, Caribbean, the poverty is higher in South Asia. So you can see that South Asia has two faces. One is very rich, sophisticated skills, educated, IT expertise, people with IT expertise. Even in the world's richest people, there are about 10 people in India in that list. Other side is people live in poverty even without basic facilities to live. These pictures are from India, but still from the picture in the bottom, you can still see that even people live in poverty, they understand the importance of education. They are very particular about getting educated. Even in our society, we know that from the day a child is born, parents think about finding a better school for them, their children, sending them, doing homework, sending them for tuition. That's a major concern in our societies. If we compare South Asia with other regions, I'm sorry, the figures are not very clear. Singapore has the highest income. Brunei, next, Malaysia. So if we compare that with the countries in South Asia, only Maldives has average income of annual income. This is 12,464. Sri Lanka, that is in 2020, 3,698. Bhutan next. And you can see that Afghanistan, it is only 499. Countries like India, Pakistan, Nepal, their per capita income is so low. You can see that even in a country where there are multimillionaires live in India, but still average income is so low because of the larger percentage of poor people in the population. If we compare this with the countries in the developed world like US and Japan, you can see that their average income per person is 69,288. When we compare it with per capita income of a person in South Asian countries, you can see the difference. But if you look at life expectancy, that is the average number of years that we expect to live when we were born. In a country like US, it is 78.9, and Japan has the highest, 84.5. You can see that among the South Asian countries, Sri Lanka has the highest life expectancy. Some argue that this is because of free health facilities provided by the government since the independence. On the other hand, Sri Lanka has invested a lot on education, free education. People, when they are educated, they know how to eat properly, how to look after them. Mothers look after their babies well, give their vaccines at time so they can be healthy. So the life expectancy in Sri Lanka is comparable to that of developed countries. And mean years of schooling, it is also highest in Sri Lanka among South Asian countries. Though we are in an economic crisis now, so you can see that we are a country that had all indicators, better indicators. So, what are the recent developments in South Asian countries? Despite the economic downturn in the world economy, most of the countries in South Asia have grown faster. South Asia can be considered as the fastest growing region in the world. With that trend, World Bank predicted that South Asia may be able to extend its growth lead over East Asia and the Pacific region. We don't know about Sri Lanka now because we are facing this economic crisis. All these countries have opened to the world, so we have a great openness. All these countries have grown rapidly in 1990s. It continued during early 2000s and around 6% in post-2009 period. These higher growth rates achieved by those countries can be a result of openness in those countries. What do we mean by openness? Before 1977, Sri Lanka's policies were the government restricted imports and encourage exports. අපි කියන්නේ ස්වයං පෝෂණය වෙන්න බලනවා. We try to produce whatever we want within the country, and trade was limited. That was changed in 1977. The Sri Lanka adopted open economic policies. Then we were open to import whatever we want and export the products that we produce. People were allowed to go to Middle East and other countries to work. We provided services to other countries. We invited investors to come and invest in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lankans were encouraged to go and invest in other countries. Tourism became a very important source of foreign income. Trade and investment reforms implemented since the 1980s and 90s have increased the region's level of global integration. After Sri Lanka, in early 1980s, India opened its economy. India was much stricter than Sri Lanka before that. But they opened their economy in 1980s, but still they were not open like Sri Lanka even at that time. They are very particular about protecting their industries, protecting their culture. So that may be the reason. After opening up, trade dependence ratio of all South Asian countries have increased. That is the amount of exports what we sell to other countries in the world, and imports what we are buying from other countries, that have increased. There are theories that explain the beneficial effects of trade. Free trade means countries engage in trade with other countries without restrictions. What are those restrictions? Taxes, duties, we call them tariff. When we impose taxes on imports, that is to restrict imports. When the government imposes tariffs, goods become expensive because the person who sells it adds that tax into the price. When we import raw materials and inputs for production of goods and services, when imports become expensive, the final product produced by using those inputs are also expensive. That will reduce our ability to compete with other countries. Similarly, if we have to pay taxes on the goods that we export, our goods become more expensive. That will make it difficult to compete in the world market. When there are no barriers, no restrictions, then it is easier for us to work in the international world market. Also, when we can export the goods that we produce, we can choose to produce the goods that we are good at producing. The goods that we cannot produce better than others, we can import them at a lower price. So when we specialize in the goods that we are good at producing, we can produce most efficiently and sell them to other countries. So the pattern we can understand, Saudi Arabia, they sell oil because they have that resource. They can draw oil from their countries, so they sell it. And Mexico, in Mexican country, Mexico, labor is cheaper. Therefore, they have enough labor in those countries. Therefore, they produce labor-intensive goods, that is, goods that you are produced by using more labor. But others are not easy to understand. We know that Japan produces cars and sells cars. They are good at producing cars. But we know that Japan is a small country. They do not have raw materials. They do not have enough labor. But we cannot explain from what we discussed why they are specialized in producing cars and electrical goods, whatever the goods that they produce. There are a number of theories explaining the benefits of trade. I'm not going to discuss them all, but I have included in the slides if you are interested, so you can go through it. That theory basically says trade means selling and buying goods from between countries is beneficial when a country produces more of a product with the same amount of input than another country. There's another theory we call theory of comparative advantage. It says trade is mutually beneficial. That is, it is beneficial for all the countries participating in trade, even if one country is more efficient than another. That principle says each country should specialize in production of the goods for which it is relatively more efficient with the lower opportunity cost. There are many theories, trade theories. I have listed them. Now we look at economic integration in Asia. What do we mean by regional integration? That is a process in which neighboring countries enter into an agreement in order to upgrade cooperation through common institutions and rules. These are some of the examples: EU, Asian, NAFTA, etc. I think you all have heard about European Union, EU. There are a number of European countries, they have agreed to work with each other under an agreement. Now, within the European Union, all the countries are free to trade between countries, travel in all the region, and most of the countries have started using this common currency, that is euro. Still, there are countries in the EU that uses their own currencies, but people have they can, if they want to. There are countries that use their own currency, but still it is possible to do the transactions in euro. There are no taxes or restrictions for trade between those countries. Why countries need regional integration? Regional integration helps economies to grow because then they can use take the advantage of comparative advantage and produce the goods that they are good at producing at a lower cost and sell it to others. When all the economies do that, everyone would be able to use goods that are produced at a lower cost and sell at lower prices. Economies of scale are the benefits people get when they produce in larger scale. We know that when the market is open for everybody, there is a larger market, so they can produce at large scale. When goods or services are produced in large scale, producers can benefit from that. They can reduce average cost by producing at large scale. Third, standard of living. When countries are integrated, so they have the ability to purchase the goods produced in other countries at lower prices. And the range of goods and services available to them are wider. Now, if we stop importing food items, we may not be able to have certain number of fruits, some chocolates, biscuits, many types of foods. So our choice will be limited. By opening to other countries, your choice of goods will be wider and you can have quality products. So that will help you to improve your standard of living. This is theory. I'm not going to talk about it. Economies of scale I have already discussed. Standard of living, it refers to the level of wealth, comfort, material goods and necessities available to a certain socioeconomic class in a certain geographic area. It is closely related to quality of life. If we go to the hospital and if there are no medicines available, or if we cannot get some medical tests done, that directly affect our health. And if we have poor education facilities, transport facilities, if we do not have access to internet, all these affect our standard of living. So having not only having good, having a higher per capita or average income, we need access to interact or trade with other countries. That will provide us access to larger basket of goods and larger choice of goods and services and more quality goods and services. And that help us improving our standard of living. So what do we mean by regional economic integration? That is free flow of trade in goods and services. Time to time, we talk about signing agreements with India to trade freely with India. Recently, not recently, about 2-3 years ago, there was a discussion of an agreement that allows people from India to come and work here and our people to go and work in India. And many people were not in favor of that. Regional economic integration means free flow of trade in goods and services, investment, capital and financial flows, and movement of people within a region. So countries sign agreements. We have signed free trade agreement with India. We have signed agreements within countries in South Asia. There are a number of free trade agreements, but it is a question, all these agreements work according to the expectations of the people who have done those initiatives. These are levels of economic integration. We can work in a free trade area like EU, European Union, or custom union, common market, economic union, or political union. I briefly go through them. Free trade area is a region in which group of countries have signed a free trade agreement and maintain little or no barriers to trade. We have signed such agreement with India. So we can trade some of the goods without tariffs or at a very low level of taxes. But the problem is India is a very large country and we are small economy. So we being a small country, we find it difficult to compete in larger Indian market. In India, labor cost is less and they produce in large scale, so they can always produce at a lower cost than that in Sri Lanka. Custom unions it's a trade bloc. A number of countries get together and there is no import or export taxes within that region, but they have a common tax to the other countries outside that bloc. Common market is little different from free trade area and custom union. So in that trade bloc, most trade barriers have been removed. And they also have a common external trade barriers and allow free movement of resources like labor. This is one step ahead of custom union. An economic union like European Union, there is a trade bloc. So they have a common market, no barriers within that group. Political union is a type of state which is composed of or created out of smaller states. By countries integrating with others, they expect economic growth to be stimulated. Also, countries specialize in those goods and services efficiently produced. We always say that it is cheaper to buy potatoes from India than producing it here. So it is beneficial for both countries not to produce potatoes, and we buy potatoes at a lower price from India, and here we produce what we can produce at a lower cost than India. When you are under regional, when you are integrating, then it is easier to gain agreement than get an WTO. With trading integration, it is also help to improve foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment is firms or investors in other countries can invest in the other countries they are trading with. That means if countries like us, we always face difficulties in attracting investment. We don't have enough investment. Therefore, we can invite investors in other countries to come and invest in Sri Lanka. That these are foreign direct investments. Government provide many benefits to encourage or attract those investors. There are political reasons for economic integration. When there is an economic interdependence, when countries are depending on each other, that creates incentives for political cooperation and reduces potential for violent confrontation. It works in both directions. When we are integrated with other countries, small countries like us always vulnerable to political influences of larger countries. But even with that, we try to work with them. You can think of the how countries like India and China, how they work. We know that they compete with each other. They are always against each other. Countries in between like us, we get pressure from both sides, but we have to be very tactful and work with both of them through economic and political cooperation. Economic integration in Asia, you can see that in 2001, trade among Asian countries was 53% of their total trade. By 2018, it has increased to 58%. Foreign direct investment, that is, countries in Asia investing in other Asian countries, was 41% of their total investment. By 2018, it has increased to 48%. And equity, buying and selling equity has increased from 12% to 18%. Debt from 8% to 17%. And tourist arrivals, it has increased from 75% to 80%. So we can see that economic integration within Asia is improving. Regional economic integration in Asia is mainly based on trade in goods and services. But we know that people from South Asian countries go to work in countries like Korea, Japan, and other countries. But that integration is mainly in trade and services, goods and services. So goods trade is easier to measure. So intra-regional exports, that means exports of goods to other countries in Asia. Countries trade with almost all the countries in the world. Intra-regional exports mean the amount of exports that goes to other countries in Asia. That is 54.6. Intra-regional imports was 62.6. You can see the graph. There is no rapid increase, but imports have slightly increased and exports have also increased, not a very significant increase. This is inter-regional trade shares. They are more or less stable. Now the time is 5 to 4. Okay, we continue with regional economic integration in South Asia. So by now we know that regional economic integration is a powerful tool for rapid growth, but it was true in Asia Pacific region, but South Asian countries are not very good in getting all the benefits of that integration. South Asia can be considered as the lowest integrated region. And when we compare with ASEAN countries, it's very, very low. That may be due to the reasons like trade barriers. Most of the countries in South Asia have imposed trade barriers such as tariff or quota or other duties. That could be one reason, and the infrastructural deficits, not having good roads, power cuts, not good services of good connections of internet, and also chronic political differences. And in countries like ours, civil conflicts and unrest, they all contribute to poor integration with other countries and achieving, getting benefits from that. South Asian countries have much to gain from sharing resources and knowledge and deepening economic integration. These are some of the efforts of South Asian countries. One is South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC. It has 8 member countries. Under that, we have signed a free trade agreement called CEFTA, that was in 2006, and CEFTA TLP later. But I don't think we have realized the true potential of that agreement. I'm not going to go through all the details of that because anybody can read them. The other one is Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal initiative, which is called BBIN. The key feature is around like 50% of the SAARC intra-region trade is taking place within that region, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. Like they have agreements for motor vehicle agreement, for regulation of passenger, personal and cargo vehicular traffic between Bangladesh, Bhutan, and India. So under this, any member nation will be allowed to use roads of other members to transport goods and passengers, paying fees and charges to be fixed later. This is another successful initiative, BIMSTEC. It has 7 members. Sri Lanka also a part of BIMSTEC. The main office, headquarters of BIMSTEC is in Bangladesh, and we have our people working there. South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation Program. So, under all that, there are many agreements signed, but not all of them now working well. In 2004, SAFTA was established to broaden free economic zone and eliminate tariff. But even today, it is not working at the level expected from it. The share of interregional trade in total trade of South Asia is low. About 5%. We only trade 5% of our international trade with our partner, with the countries in South Asia. One reason could be the goods that we produce, goods that produce in those South Asian countries are similar. We have similar resources and produce similar goods. But that percentage is over 20% in Southeast Asia. Interregional trade in South Asia is less than 1/3 of its potential. There are trade barriers, including high trade costs. Not only trade barriers are not in the mode of taxes. There are many red tape. Once you engage in trade, you have to fill lots of forms, you have to go after many people, sometimes bribe them to get the approval. That process is long, so people are not interested in getting into all that trouble. We know that people about the bribery and corruption, that all discourage people engage in trade with us, as well as the lack of capacity to supply goods being demanded by neighboring countries. This also have contributed to unexploited trade potential in the sub-region. So the main challenge that we are facing is to increase economic activities between these SAFTA members, is boosting and diversifying regional production networks. From the day that we got independence and till today, we are producing tea, rubber, coconut, and those traditional products. We sell tea, but we are not trying to sell them according to the demands of or the preferences of the people that buy tea. Now, people in many countries like to buy flavored teas, tea bags. So that value addition, we can do that value addition before selling them. So our regional networks remain underdeveloped, except for a few sectors such as textiles and garments. Trade in South Asia has grown faster than GDP, with an increase in trade to GDP ratio from 20.8% to 50%. And trade in services has also grown even faster than its trade in goods, reflecting a transformation in the service industry. Now there are many people from the outside world come to India for medical treatment and other services. Even within the region, we know that people from countries like Sri Lanka going to India for to get medical treatment. Sri Lanka has qualified people, good hospitals. There are people with excellent skills, but still we are not able to attract those who need those services. We have many potential in providing education to other countries. Not only school education, university education. But what is happening? Many of our children are going to other countries for education. This is patterns of trade in South Asia. You can see that imports have increased. Also, exports have increased. There are many free trade agreements signed in Asia. 4 of them have discontinued. 167, that's a quite large number, they have signed and in effect. 13 signed but not yet in effect. Negotiations launched for 83. Only signed 5. These numbers, you can refer to them later. Why that integration is important for Asia? We all can benefit from trade integration. There are evidences from others that it can increase economic growth and reduce poverty. It can act as a buffer against the spillover effects of the rising global trade tension. Problems in global integration, widening income inequality, high-income countries take more advantages. Spillover effects cascade into a broader set of economies, especially through production sharing networks. We come to that. Trade creation means when there is a reduction in trade barriers, that will reduce prices, that will create a new trade between countries. Therefore, trade expands. In South Asian countries, I mentioned that before, we all produce similar goods and services. That's what I mean by highly complementary trade structures. Increase access to wider export markets and preferential tariffs, which encourage imports of intermediate goods. This is again graph showing trade in Asia and the world. You can see that there is not much difference. These numbers give you an idea of trade in South Asia, trade dependency. Trade means the value of exports and imports of goods and services. If we take it as a ratio of GDP, that is gross domestic product, it is more than 100% for 17 Asian countries and less than 50% for only 10 Asian countries. That shows us that almost all the Asian countries are engaged in trade with other countries. Exports to GDP ratio of 24 Asian countries is more than 50%. Imports to GDP ratio of 23 Asian countries is more than 50%. 23 Asian countries have recorded a trade surplus, that is exporting more than they import. And there was a deficit in 21 countries in the same period. This also shows compare the imports and exports in Asian countries. Global and regional value chains, these are very important in the world economy, current economy. Global value chains means that the products that we export, it goes through number of countries for further production before going to the market. For example, if we take Toyota company, they do the designing and planning in Japan. Parts of the cars are produced in number of different countries. It could be Malaysia or Bangladesh or some other countries, Philippines. Then they are assembled into cars in one country. They are distributed by another country. Marketing is done by another country. Computers are the same. Before it reaches the buyer, the production process goes through that takes place in number of countries that provide many opportunities for participating countries. Now we know that India is producing Audi cars and BMW, Mercedes-Benz. When people think about the cars produced by India, like Suzuki or Maruti, we have that gives a low quality feeling. When they produce Maruti or Audi or Benz or Mercedes-Benz or BMW, they can't do that. They have to respect the guidelines and the quality maintained by the mother company. So they produce those products. By doing that, they get the technology, skills, expertise, and finally, income for the people living there. These global value chains participation rate is 68.1% in 2018. That is good for the countries of the mother company. If we take Japan, they are a small country with a small population, no raw materials or resources. So a country like that, we can understand why they want other countries to participate in their production process. Regional value chains, that share of gross exports that involves production in at least two countries in the same region using cross-border production networks. That is networks within the region. That rate has also increased to 48.9% in 2018 and further from 47.8% in 2019. Here I'm explaining global value chains, how it works, so you can go through it. Even primary sectors like agriculture, they are not these developed sectors, but even those sectors report the highest regional value chain participation, that is 72.1%, and highest global value chain participation rate, that is 92.4% in 2018. So we can see that regions' trade links are growing, but slowly. But they have linkages to medium and high technology and business services. The companies are in Sri Lanka, we have Mars branding, that companies. We can compete with in the market, world market, products of those companies. We can compete in the market because we are working with the companies that are able to compete in the world market. What are the challenges in regional integration in Asia? I go through this quickly. Regional integration, it can hurt some countries. It might not lead to benefits for all economies, for everyone in an economy equally. Even the free trade agreement that we have with India, they can produce onion, potatoes, and vegetables at a lower cost. But if we are going to import them, it can affect our farmers in uh, in local farm, for local farm. Therefore, government has to protect it. Potential loss of sovereignty and control over domestic issues. That is why people were against when the government tried to sign that agreement with India. There is a debate whether integration is trade creation or trade diversion. Trade creation is it creates trade with countries. Trade diversion means when suppose that we sign a free trade agreement with India, then instead of buying clothes from Singapore, if we buy it from India, that is converting trade that is taking place in with another country towards India. So there is a debate whether integrate creates trade or diverse trade. So these are the challenges to interregional trade in Asia: persistent global trade tensions, US-China trade war, and India-China, they also compete with each other. COVID-19, all these have weakened global demand. And it has also weakened investments. Rise of anti-globalization, anti-immigration, and strong nationalistic sentiments like Brexit, US elections. So these came out because that globalization and trade agreements have led to the loss of jobs, stagnating incomes, and increased inequality. US has suffered a lot because most of the goods used in US are now produced by Chinese companies, so they can buy them at a lower cost. That caused losing jobs of large number of people in US, and China investing in other countries. All that affect other economies. Similarities in exports. If we take countries in a certain region, there are similarities in what they export. Trade diversion, I already talked about it. And poorly designed free trade agreements based on political agenda will not work. Even sometimes when countries enter into agreements, they are not able to keep them. There are other barriers other than taxes, like I said before. The new normal, what do we mean by new normal? That is the advent of the fourth industrial revolution of digital technology and e-commerce platforms that bypass normal trade channels. So because of that digital technology and e-commerce, people can easily work with using those platforms with the other countries, other partners in other countries. And internet allows for further outsourcing, automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, replacement of unskilled labor with machines. High level of informal border trade, shared history, culture, languages, and proximity. In countries like India, Bhutan, and Nepal, Bangladesh, there is a considerably higher level of informal border trade. They are not separated by sea like us, so it is always they can do that. High cost of interregional trade. So cost of trading within South Asia remain high, making trading with neighboring nations more expensive or less competitive compared to trading with distant partners. Poor supply capabilities of less developed countries. This is the main reason: poor trade facilitation at the borders, like excessive delays, high cost and uncertainties from inconsistent and complex border crossing procedures and documentation. It's a big problem. I included that picture. When we trade with other partners, our neighbors, these pictures are from South Asian countries like India, Nepal, Bangladesh. You can see these roads and the condition of this vehicle. At the same time, they have very good highways. So these type of transport and facilities affect trade. There can be large delays in using those methods of transport. This I'm not going to explain them because they are self-explained. It is 4:30. I only talk about way forward. So moving forward as a region calls for making the best use of opportunities over challenges. South Asia can be best realized by exploiting the immense potential for integration and its subsequent trade, investment, and growth opportunities that we have not tapped yet. Promoting greater regionalism is crucial in addressing challenges, as this creates opportunities to harness the spillover benefits of India's growth success. Trade agreements could be more viable as economies are on a level playing field. Again, I take the example of India and Sri Lanka. It is very difficult to level play with a country like that. Given its economic power, India will have to take on a disproportionately larger responsibility for promoting regional cooperation in South Asia. Okay, I have given the summary and some data tables. I stop here and you can ask questions if you have. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much for your interesting and informative presentation. I think that this is timely, very important to get to know about economy in Sri Lanka and what is happening in Asia. There are some students who have learned economics, but majority of them are, madam, not. I think that they have not done economics for their.
So that's why I try to be general.
Yes. So it's very good. So students, if you have any questions or any clarification, or if any comments, it is your time. So please unmute your mic and ask any question you have, or you have another option. You can use a chat box and put your question into the chat box. So over to you, students. So it is time to ask questions.
There is a question. It says many experts believe that the war of the future will not be fought with weapons, but in cyberspace. Can you explain how we can use the Asian regional integration and economic cooperation to counter such a war? This is something I have not thought of. But as a region, we have some members with high expertise like India or some other countries in outside South Asia like Japan or Korea. Maybe as a group, it will be easier to face them rather than facing them individually. I have thought it earlier. I think this may not be a very good answer for that. I'm sorry about it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to deliver a vote of thanks on behalf of the students of short course on cultural linkage towards an Asian ideology. First, I would like to thank our lecturer, Senior Professor Anoma Abhayaratne, for sharing her time and knowledge with us and for delivering today's lecture amidst her busy schedule. Madam, we are blessed to have you contribute to this course. Next, I wish to thank Dr. Himanta Premaratne and other staffs of KDU who have brought these lectures together. Thank you. Last but not least, I thank all participants from our university for joining us today. Your participation has made this lecture a successful event, and I believe it has provided you with an insight into economics of Asia. To conclude, let me once more express my gratitude to Senior Professor Anoma Abhayaratne for accepting our invitations for third consecutive year and delivering today's lecture. Madam, it's an honor to have you with us, and your time and efforts are deeply appreciated. Before we end, I kindly request all students to switch on your cameras in order to take group photograph. Thank you.
Thank you.